Hello everyone. This presentation is part 2 of Hicks-Hansen ISLM model. Here we will see the derivation of IS curve that shows goods market equilibrium schedule. So before starting my presentation, I request every one of you to please subscribe my channel and share it with your friends. So as we have already discussed in the part 1, that ISLM is derived from IS model and LM model. IS model is associated with goods market and LM model is associated with asset market. So for ISLM, we will derive a curve called IS curve or IS schedule that is showing the goods market equilibrium schedule. Whereas for LM model for asset market, we will be deriving LM curve that will show the money market equilibrium schedule. So both the IS curve and the LM curve show the combination of interest rate and the level of output in the economy. We will see how Hicks-Hansen ISLM model used the classical model of interest rate to derive the IS schedule. Now we will see the derivation of IS curve in 2 steps. Step 1. Step 1 will explain why investment depends on interest rate. We will explain it with the help of investment schedules for both the planned investment schedule and for autonomous investment schedule. In the last slide, I have explained the planned investment schedule, which is also called as endogenous investment, which is dependent upon the rate of interest, whereas autonomous investment schedule is also called as exogenous investment, which is independent of the rate of interest and the level of income. So let's find it out. IS curve is derived in 2 steps. Step 1. In step 1, we will explain why investment depends upon interest rate. This is a downward sloping investment curve that shows inverse relationship between the investment and the rate of interest. Higher the interest rate means the cost of borrowing fund is very high. This will reduce the investment. Lower the interest rate means the fund cost of borrowing fund are lesser and this will increase the investment in the economy. In step 2, we will explain insertion of investment demand function in aggregate demand. So, we will insert the investment demand function in aggregate demand and try to find out the relationship between the interest rate and the level of income, which will give us the IS curve or IS schedule. This is planned investment schedule. Planned investment depends upon the rate of interest. It is the planned level of investment spending at each rate of interest, which shows that when the interest rates are low, planned investment are high. And when the interest rate is high, planned investment are low. So inverse relationship between the interest rate and the planned investment in the economy. Let us see the equation for investment spending function. This is the equation given where I stands for the rate of interest, small b stands for the coefficient of the responsiveness of investment spending to the interest rate, and capital I bar stands for the autonomous investment spending. What is this autonomous investment spending? It is the investment spending which is independent of both income and rate of interest. So the investment schedule is depend upon 2 important factors. Number 1 is the autonomous investment and number 2 is coefficient of responsiveness of investment spending to the rate of interest, and this coefficient is positive. So the factors which decide the position of investment schedule is determined by two factors, as we have said, that one is the slope, that is coefficient of responsiveness to the investment spending to rate of interest, and the another one is the autonomous investment spending. In the planned investment schedule, concept of elasticity plays a very important role. In this equation, investment depends upon autonomous investment and the planned investment. Here I stands for rate of interest and B stands for the value of coefficient, which measures how sensitive the investment spending is to the change in the rate of interest. So when the investment schedule is highly elastic, a fall in the rate of interest will lead to a large increase in the investment, and the investment schedule curve will be flatter. But when the investment schedule is less elastic, that will show a fall in the rate of interest lead to a very small increase in investment, and investment schedule will be steeper in slope. So when the investment schedule is highly elastic, the change in the investment is very much sensitive to the change in the rate of interest. Small fall in the interest lead to large increase in investment. But when it is less elastic, change in investment is very much less sensitive to the change in interest rate. A large fall in the interest rate lead to a very small increase in investment. That means the investment schedule is steeper in slope. Now let us see autonomous investment spending schedule. What is this autonomous investment? It is the investment which is independent of both the level of income and the rate of interest in the economy. So this equation of investment schedule, I bar is the autonomous investment. It's a downward sloping curve which shows that autonomous investment spending shift the investment schedule. Now let us find out how a change in the autonomous investment spending shift the investment schedule. So suppose if there is increase in the autonomous investment, it would lead to the rightward shift in the investment schedule. If there is decrease in the autonomous investment, it would lead to the leftward shift in the investment schedule. Now, whenever you write the equation for investment schedule, you should be very clear that this investment schedule depends upon the autonomous investment and the planned investment. This autonomous investment is independent of both the rate of interest and the level of income, but this planned investment depends upon the rate of interest. Here, the coefficient B measures the responsiveness of investment spending to the interest rate. So the unit of measurement of B depends upon the rate of interest. Now let us compare both the figure of autonomous investment and planned investment. If you see the figure of autonomous investment, you will find that an increase in the autonomous investment lead to a rightward shift in the investment schedule, and decrease in the autonomous investment lead to the leftward shift in investment schedule. So this clearly shows that at a given rate of interest, if you move from point A to point B, this movement from A to B is not because of the change in the rate of interest. It is because of the increase in the autonomous investment. If you move from point A to point C, interest rate is unchanged, but you move towards the left side of the investment schedule because autonomous investment has fallen down. Now you see the plan investment curve. Here you can see that investment is highly responsive to the rate of interest. A small decrease in the rate of interest lead to a large increase in the investment. And this investment schedule is very elastic. But if the investment respond very little to the rate of interest, then this investment schedule will become less elastic and it will be more in a vertical shape. Another important point which I would like to highlight is that autonomous investment explains you that there is a shift in the investment schedule with the change in the autonomous investment. But the planned investment tells you about the movement on the same investment schedule with the change in the rate of interest. If the rate of interest falls, investment increase. But if the rate of interest rises, there will be a decrease in investment and you will move on the same investment curve. So point A, you will move to point B, and from if there is decrease in the interest rate and increase in investment, and if there is increase in the interest rate and decrease in investment, you move from point A to point C. So this clearly shows that autonomous investment lead to the shift in the investment schedule, while planned investment lead to the movement on the same investment schedule. For the derivation of IS curve, we have completed step 1, where we have seen how investment and its investment schedule depends upon the rate of interest. Now in step 2, we will see what happens when we insert investment demand function in the aggregate demand. And then we will find the combination of income and interest rates that keep the goods market in the equilibrium. To understand step 2 of the derivation of IS curve, we need to understand what is aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is the total demand in the economy, which consists of consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. So aggregate demand function is written as this. So now we will modify this aggregate demand function to reflect the new planned investment spending schedule. This modified aggregate demand function shows that aggregate demand depends upon the planned investment spending, where investment depends upon the rate of interest, and this B shows the value of coefficient, which shows the sensitiveness of investment with the change in the rate of interest. And it also depends upon marginal propensity to consume from the disposable income. Whereas net export is constant, government spending is constant, and transfer payment is also constant. So our final equation for modified aggregate demand is aggregate demand consists of autonomous investment, which is independent of income and the rate of interest, and planned investment, which depends upon the rate of interest, plus marginal propensity to consume from the disposable income. Now what next we will do? We will insert the investment demand function in this aggregate demand function. So our investment demand function is the combination of both autonomous investment and induced investment. Here you always remember that whether you write this as an autonomous investment or this, both are equal. So our final equation is this, which shows that as the interest rate changes, either it increase or decrease, the equilibrium level of income or output in the economy also changes. So let us see this with the help of the figure in the coming slide. Let us see the derivation of IS curve with the help of this figure. This figure is divided into two parts. Panel A, which shows the relationship between aggregate demand and income. Panel B shows the relationship between the interest rate and income. We start with the insertion of investment demand function in aggregate demand to find the combination of income and the interest rate in the goods market. So the economy is at aggregate demand AD1 when the interest rate was I1. The value of intercept at interest I1 gives the equilibrium point E1. This E1 point gives the income Y1. When we drop it down, we get the point E1, which shows the relationship between the interest rate and the level of income in panel B. This E1 point is the point on the IS curve, showing the relationship between interest rate and income. Now suppose if there is a fall in the rate of interest from I1 to I2, aggregate demand shifts up. So this is the fall in the interest rate from I1 to I2. As a result of fall in interest rate, aggregate demand shift upward and the new intercept at the fallen interest rate I2 gives a new point of equilibrium E2. When we drop a line, we get the higher level of income Y2. In panel B, we can see the new equilibrium E2 gives the combination of interest rate I2 and Y2. So here, if we join the points E1 and E2, we get the IS curve. This IS curve shows the combination of interest rate and level of income in the goods market. That is why IS curve is also called as goods market equilibrium schedule. The IS curve is a downward sloping curve which shows a negative relationship between the interest rate and the level of income. Here, with the fall in the rate of interest, there was increase in the aggregate demand which lead to the increase in income in the economy. Now let us see the slope of IS curve and the role of multiplier in deciding the shape of IS curve. The steepness of IS curve depends upon two factors. Number one is the value of coefficient and number two is the value of multiplier. We have already seen that the coefficient B measures how sensitive investment spending is to the change in the rate of interest. So from this equation, we have seen that if there is a change in the interest rate, it will lead to change the investment and this investment will impact on aggregate demand. Change in aggregate demand will lead to a change in the income or output in the economy. If we see the multiplier studies the relationship between the investment and income. If there is a change in investment, there would be a multiplier times change in income in the economy. So if we apply multiplier in the equation, we will see that if there is a change in the interest rate, it would lead to change in investment and this change in investment lead to a multiplier times change in income in the economy. So both the coefficient and multiplier shows the steepness of IS curve. If the investment is very sensitive to both, then IS curve would be very flatter. If an investment is less sensitive to coefficient value or the multiplier value, IS would be more steeper. In this figure, we will see what happens when the value of coefficient is very large. That means investment is very sensitive to the change in the rate of interest and IS curve will become flatter. So let us find it out. So this is the original demand curve with the given intercept. Equilibrium is at point E. Level of income is Y1, which gives the point E where the interest rate and income is given, and this E point is the point on IS curve. Now, suppose that if the interest rate falls from I1 to I2, that means the fall in interest rate, a new equilibrium is at point E2, which increases the income from Y1 to Y2. IS curve, we will find point E2, which gives the interest rate and the level of income. So here the fall in interest rate is showing the increase in income from Y1 to Y2. And when we join the point E1 and E2, it gives the IS curve, which is a flatter curve. So this shows that investment is very sensitive to the rate of interest. A fall in investment lead to a large increase in the income due to the increase in the aggregate demand. Now let us take a situation when the value of coefficient D is small, that means investment is less sensitive to the change in rate of interest and IS curve becomes steeper. So what happens here? Initially, we are in aggregate demand 1 where the interest rate is I1. This is the intercept for I1 interest. This is the point of equilibrium, and when we drop it down, we get Y1 level of income. By dropping it to panel B, we find Y1 income and I1 interest rate. Point E is the point on IS curve. Now, suppose there is fall in the interest rate from I1 to I2. So this shows the fall in the rate of interest. As a result of fall in the rate of interest, we see that the intercept move up and aggregate demand curve shift upward. A new equilibrium is at point E, giving the income Y2, which is greater than Y1. And when we drop it down, we get the interest rate and income is Y2. So when we see there, fall in the investment is this much amount and increase in income is very small as compared to fall interest rate. This shows that investment is not very sensitive to the change in the rate of interest because in the previous figure, a small fall in interest rate lead to a large increase in income. In this figure, a large fall in interest rate lead to a very small increase in income. So IS curve is a steeper curve which is showing that investment is less sensitive to the change in the rate of interest. Here I have done the comparison of both the IS curves. So here what you will see that when the IS curve is steeper, that means a fall in the interest rate lead to increase in aggregate demand from AD1 to AD2. That leads to increase in income. And this in panel B shows that fall in the rate of interest is much larger, but increase in income is smaller than the fall in rate of interest. As a result, when we join both E1 and E2 point, we get IS curve, which is very steeper. When the IS curve is flatter, we see that a fall in the interest rate from I1 to I2 lead to a large increase in aggregate demand. This increase in aggregate demand lead to a large increase in income. So in panel B, we can easily see that fall in the rate of interest lead to a large increase in income, and this gives the IS curve, which is flatter. Let us find out the effect of fiscal policy on multiplier and how it affects the shape of IS curve. What is this fiscal policy? It is the policy which is related to tax and public expenditure announced in the budget. It affects the slope of IS curve. How? Through the process of investment multiplier. What is this investment multiplier? Investment multiplier studies the relationship between the change in the investment and its impact on income. So investment multiplier states that there will be a large increase in income if there is increase in investment. An increase in income is multiplier times increase in investment. Another important point you remember about investment multiplier is investment multiplier is inversely related to tax. Tax and savings are leakages in the multiplier process. If there is increase in tax, that will reduce the investment, and the reduction in investment lead to fall in the income by multiplier times. Therefore, from this equation we see that multiplier and coefficient plays a very important role in deciding the income which is affected by the interest. So this shows that investment multiplier measures how sensitive the investment is to the change in the tax. An increase in tax reduces the multiplier, and reduction in tax increases the value of multiplier. So here in this figure, we will see when the multiplier is very sensitive to tax, IF will be a steeper curve. Why? When multiplier is less sensitive, that means a large reduction in tax lead to a very small increase in investment. That means multiplier is not very sensitive to the change in the tax. Now, IS curve is steeper in slope. But when the multiplier is very sensitive to tax, IS curve will be a flatter slope. That means here we can see a small fall in the tax lead to a large increase in investment. And this large increase in investment lead to a large increase in income by multiplier times. And therefore, IS curve is flatter. Now we will see the shift in the IS curve caused by change in autonomous spending, that is spending which is independent of the rate of interest and the level of income. So in this figure we can see the shift in IS curve caused by a change in autonomous investment. So this is also very interesting, where we have to study what happens when the change in the autonomous investment takes place when there is no change in the interest rate in the economy. So when the economy is initially at this aggregate demand, the income was Y1, interest rate was I1, but with the increase in the autonomous investment, aggregate demand curve shift up. At the given rate of interest I1, the demand curve shifts upward, making a new equilibrium from E1 to E2. This leads to a rise in income in the economy. And this increase in income is multiplier times increase in autonomous investment. As a result, the IS curve shifts towards the right. It moves from point E1 to E2 at the given interest rate, and the income increases from Y1 to Y2. So now the question is, how much does the IS curve shift? So the answer is the IS curve shifts horizontally by the distance equal to the multiplier times change in autonomous spending. That is AG. The AG is the value of multiplier, and delta A is the increase in the autonomous spending. If you have any question on this presentation, please put your question in the comment section and like and subscribe my channel to get further notification. Thank you so much.